I'm Janice Hossteiger. After 3 decades in the marketing business and many years of being an entrepreneur, I've learned a thing or two about marketing. Join me as we talk about marketing, small business, and life in between. Welcome to My Weekly Marketing. As we look ahead to 2024, there's one thing I really love to do, and that is plan. Any other planners in the house? So I'm dedicating a few podcast episodes to this very topic. Episode 34 from last week with my guest Julia Wolf, where we talk about process mapping, which in all honesty can be beneficial any time of year. And next week's episode, where I'll be talking to you about planning your product ladder and planning your marketing for the new year. Today, though, I wanted to bring on my good friend, Tammy McKinney. Tammy, like so many of us, got her start in the corporate world, but she discovered she has a true passion for personal development and became a life and business coach. Tammy was my guest on episode number 2 early on, and she talked about how to manage your business when you have a personal crisis. But today, she's going to talk about the business side of things and how she does a revenue plan for her clients. She does what she calls a revenue roadmap. What I love about this interview is that Tammy, like me, is not a numbers person, but she has been able to employ these techniques to easily grow her business to be very, very successful. If you've ever heard Tammy talk before, you know that one of her passions is personal development. So I love that she shares a lot of wisdom about that area in the planning stage too, because she knows that we need to be true to ourselves and the mission that we are given as we run our own businesses. By the end of this episode, you'll know how to approach planning for 2026 with confidence, which will allow you to grow your business too. Now here's Tammy. Hey, good morning, Tammy. How are you today?
Good morning. Great. Nice, cool weather for a change.
For Texas, yes. It's cold, actually. You know, this Minnesota girl, I put my parka on this morning because it was frosty out there. So I'm just not used to it down here in Texas. But anyway, Tammy, I am so glad that you are back. For those of you who don't know, that Tammy was on an earlier episode where she talked about kind of the challenges of balancing being a solopreneur when personal challenges come up in your life. So I will add a link to that in the show notes. But let's see the other side of Tammy. Let's see the side of Tammy who is a phenomenal coach. So tell me a little bit more about your professional background.
Yeah, sure. So I am so glad to be back. I love your audience. I love the people that you are reaching with this podcast, and I've loved to see it grow. There's so many opportunities for us to, get out there and operate as a solopreneur, even a small business, and just feel like we're winging it or doing it alone. And so your podcast has brought on so many cool guests. I've been enjoying that. But for me personally, I think that the big shift I've made, I think even since I was on that last podcast, is, I've launched a full consulting company so that I'm not going so solo anymore. And so my focus is really on leaders in small business, leaders in nonprofits, education, corporate. And the reason that I'm so passionate about that is because I think, the people that are leading are the most critical piece of the puzzle for any organization to succeed, whether that be small business or be a bigger corporation. My focus in particular, and I know, you really have the same drive too, is people that are making their positive impact in the world and giving them the coaching, the consulting, the training to help them succeed. And so we know, we've talked a lot about this, like it is this journey of business development, personal development, and leadership development. And so I bring my corporate background as well as running my own small businesses, from solopreneur to employees and so on, into the new company so that I can bring those right experts in at the right time for leaders that are, really trying to grow, trying to develop an impact beyond just, something they can do by themselves. And that's not to say that solopreneurs can't succeed, but, the new company is about helping leaders that are leading other people too, whether that's your clients or your team. So anyway,
Mhm.
that's kind of the shift I've made, I think, since the last time we talked. And we know this personally, like we have to have all those pieces. We have to continue to develop ourselves personally and those strategies around our business, as well as, leading other people. So yeah.
Absolutely. And, we really can only go so far on our own as well. We have to bring in others and, um, team members, uh, outsourced people that can help us in our business because we all reach a certain point where we just cannot do it all anymore.
Yeah.
But one thing as leaders, and we're all leaders, even if we're solopreneurs, we're all CEOs of our companies, right?
Yeah.
As leaders, one of the big things that we have to do is plan goal setting and, just balancing all of that with your personal development too, because we can go gung ho and schedule to the hilt for the next year. But we have to look at what we're capable of doing, and we don't want to burn out in that endeavor either.
Right.
So what's kind of the first step when we're looking at revenue goal setting for the new year? Let's say, what's the first step in that? Is it just coming up with a number, or what do you consider that important
Yeah.
first step?
A great question. And you and I have talked about this. I don't really love talking about the numbers, but it wasn't until I got really intimate with my numbers and realized that they were sort of the key to actually creating the momentum that I wanted to create in my business. Like we have to know where we're going. And all leadership is about taking people on a journey, right? Whether you're trying to sell them one product or you're trying to, develop a whole organization. So it always starts with sort of that vision, right? What is the vision? And of course, in most settings, I'm going to tell you, like, have your mission, your vision, your values, kind of look at where you want to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out. But given that you have some general idea of where you want to take your business, in this case in particular, you can kind of just pie in the sky a little bit, dream about those revenue goals, but then you got to back into like, how am I actually going to get there? Right.
Mhm.
And so it starts with, and I encourage leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, everybody we're talking to today, really think about what are your life goals? What is your life vision? And so even, this is part of my whole methodology, you do that 5 years, 10 years out, but also then for the next year, like how many hours a week do you want to work? And how many trips do you want to take? And even get out that calendar and block it out so that you can see
Mhm.
realistically, like how many hours do I have? And you're saying, well, Tammy, what does this have to do with revenue? Well, you have to know where you're going to generate that income from, right? And so once you kind of block out everything that's not negotiable for you, time off at the holidays and travel and how many hours a week you want to work, how many hours you're going to sleep, all of those things,
Mhm.
you get to decide, what are you really willing to put into this business? And most of us don't do it that way. Most of us are like, I'm going to do whatever it takes, right? And that's where burnout, frustration, exhaustion can come from pretty quickly, especially when you're a small business or a solopreneur. And so look at sort of your life. Like that's a really tangible exercise, like legit get out that calendar and block it out. And then start to ask yourself, okay, how many hours do I need to spend on administrative tasks for the business, the overhead, as you would, if you would, right? Like how many hours are going to be around, bookkeeping and order processing and working on my website and creating content, because all of that is sort of non-revenue generating activity. Because then, and it's not that it's non-revenue generating in the long haul, right? Marketing is a long game, but and we need to do it to generate revenue, but then how many hours are you actually fulfilling? How many hours are left to fulfill to actually serve your clients? And so if you're a coach, a trainer, a consultant, a speaker, any service-based industry, you're looking at how many hours it has to be you that is showing up fulfilling with the customer. And then from there, we start to look at budget, and we start to look at budgeting our time. I mean, we're talking about budgeting our time, but then also budgeting those dollars. And so when you get it sort of pulled in this tightly, and you're looking at, wow, I really only have like 7 hours a week to work with clients, or maybe it's 27, whatever that magic number is, then you get to make some decisions around that, right? You're either going to bring in other people to help with some of those tasks to free up your schedule, or you're going to raise your prices, or you're going to build scalable things like, digital products or whatever. And that's really, and we can come back to that in a minute. There's those three ways to sort of increase revenue. But if we're talking about setting a revenue goal, like just look at 2024, the upcoming, 9 to 12 months, how many hours can you actually spend serving clients? And then you get to put a price tag on that. And if you already know your price tag, great, but put a price tag on it. Like for each of those hours, how much is it that you're going to make? And so like we talked about, we've talked about before, the only way to put that price tag on there is you've got to know your business expenses, your living expenses, and then what I call your joy budget, right? You have to know your budget. And even if these are a little bit ballpark numbers, that's okay. But how much do you have to pay your bills every month, in your business, in your personal life? And then how much extra do you want on top of that? And once you have like sort of this time budget and you have this like dollar budget, then you get to start to line those things up and come up with your numbers.
I love what you said, especially that you started with your mission and vision. And that's something that I actually personally have been reworking this year. And you know that, Tammy. But your mission and vision can kind of change. And depending on where you are in your life, depending on your goals, because, life changes and our kids get older and, we get busy or less busy. And so those things change over time. And so I love that you start with that. And I think it's important to restart with that every single year because it, like I said, life does change and you don't necessarily know what your year is going to look like necessarily. Sometimes we have aging parents. Sometimes we have kids that need all of our attention. And I think that's a great place to start. I think just looking at the calendar, like you said, and determining how many hours per week are you willing to spend on your business? Because I've been in burnout and it's no fun. And I've been in seasons where I'm just working way too many hours and it takes its toll on my marriage. It takes its toll on my health. I'm not working out as much as I should, and I don't leave time for myself. I don't schedule things for myself. So I think that's really, really important. I'm so glad that you started there. And I also love that you talked about the non-billable things. And one of the things I know we've talked about before, and I know I've talked about on the podcast before, is one of the most powerful exercise I've done is to track everything that every task I've done for a week, and then check on or put them in different columns based on whether they're a $10 task, $100 task, or $1,000 task. And those $10 tasks can easily be outsourced to a virtual assistant, to a contractor, or whoever, because you're going to find that the amount of time that you have to spend in your business is going to be limited. And that's really the only way to grow, right? Is to start outsourcing some of this and letting people who are experts in that particular field do that thing, right? I mean, I don't do my books because I am just not a books person, but those numbers tell a story. So I'm also glad that you brought that up too, because you do need to know your numbers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many things in there you said that just, I've experienced firsthand the struggle of, well, I can't afford anybody to do it, but I also can't afford not to have anybody to do it because the more time I spend here, everything is time or money. Everything is time or money. And in our business, more than anything, like we have to know the tasks and we have to know the cost. And in order to manage a business, and so many, I can't remember the statistics, but so many small businesses go under in the first 1 to 5 years. And part of this is just not doing it intentionally. And that's why, we talk about that you start with the vision and then you get into that strategic planning, which is what we're talking about, right? And as you know, I have a process called, the revenue roadmap, which is similar to what you do from a marketing perspective. But this whole idea that you get to create your own strategic plan and your roadmap, but without a roadmap, you're going to end up all over the place, right? You're going to try to go to Florida and end up in Alaska or whatever you want to say. But you get to create that, whatever that looks like. And you and I have both invested so much in personal development and business development and leadership development. We read and we invest so much, but that can be overwhelming too. We can be trying constantly to shift the latest strategy and waste time and money doing things just because we thought somebody else said. And this is where I want to kind of come into this conversation about leadership. You get to lead your business the way that you want to lead your business, the way that works for you. And that's why having that life vision and having these revenue goals is so important, because if you don't know what you're leading people to or leading from, you're just going to end up all over the place. And so we often think of the word leadership and we think of people in politics, or we think of, executives in big corporations or whatever, but we're all leaders, just as you said, of our own business and our own life. So even hiring people, you and I have both experienced this too. Like we hire people and we're just like, well, what can you do for me? And then we let them do what they say we can do for us. No, we get to lead that too. And you've gotten really super good at this. I know we've talked about this, like getting super clear on what it is that you need, when you need it, how you need it, right? We get to lead that too. And I think that that's where we, in business, think we have to do everything, or we can only do things, it's better if we do it ourselves. And I've done this. I did this for social media for years. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I'm the one that's supposed to do it. Right. And so, one of the tools, I can't remember who I learned this from, but every single task, we should be looking at it with a no, not me first, and then come at it and say, can this be automated? Can it be delegated? Or does it need to be me, right? Does it really need to be me? And instead of thinking it's going to be me till I can afford somebody else, let's look at it the other way. Like, how can I get this off my plate? Because that does allow more hours for the billable things, the revenue generating things that are best done by us in our business, because it is us. And we, we always have that eye to, not just profitability, but also, scalability and credibility, right? We want to be sure that the things that are going to be recurring revenue things are done really, really well, because repeat customers is way easier. Like we've talked about this before too, than constant client acquisition, right? Mm-hmm. But all of those things take time and energy, acquiring new clients, as well as creating things or building the relationships that bring you recurring clients and recurring revenue. And so I'm kind of jumping all over because this is such an important topic. We've got to know our numbers, and we've got to think about, where is it coming from? Where is it really going to come from? And we have to be realistic with ourselves for a 12-month period. And I have all my clients do 90-day plans, right? For the next 90 days, how are you going to move towards that 1-year goal that's going to move you towards that 5-year vision? And really looking at that strategic planning is going to help you set the best possible goals. And it's sort of a reverse engineering, right? Like, where do you want to end up? And realistically, how are you going to get there?
That is so true, what you just said. I mean, we really do need to have, we really need to take a hard look at where we're spending our own time and making sure it aligns with what our goals are, because it is so easy. And I ran into this in my own business too, having a design background. I'm thinking, I don't need to pay someone to design my website. I designed lots of websites. I'll just do it myself. Or I don't need, I can just design my own logo. That's no big deal. And I found myself doing that with clients too. That's like, well, we should outsource this. I'll just jump in and say, oh, no, I can do that for you. I've done that lots of times. And it's just such a poor use of our time. It's moving. It's like the CEO of a large corporation goes down to the assembly line and, rolls up their sleeves. And that's fine from time to time. or in a pinch, but that's not what your job is when you're running a company. Your job is not the person that needs to do everything, at least later on. Now, when you're just starting out, I totally get it. We're all on our own. We're just starting out. But I think especially if we're planning ahead, if we're at the point where we're planning ahead for the following year and we are putting together our own revenue roadmap, we have to keep that in mind, that we are not best suited to do all the things.
Well, and I think this is the intersection, right? This is the intersection that I'm so passionate about: a business development, leadership development, personal development, right? And so the personal development piece, as we're talking about this, and what I work on with business owners and executives, is let's look at who you are and what your strengths are, because we want to stay in that strength zone, and especially as relates, like we're talking about, to the business. And just like you said, an executive going down to the assembly line, that's not their strength area. That's not where they're, committed to developing mastery. And that is, something we get to consider as the business owner. Like, where is it that we're committed to developing mastery so that we can bring our absolute best? And then where can we pull in other people? And I know when you're a solopreneur or a small business owner, sometimes we get to barter for that. And I've done some of that when I was first starting out. I bartered, some coaching for some graphics work, and specifically, actually. And then I've even bartered, housekeeping for coaching. I mean, we get to look, which housekeeping is not my strength at all. But we get to look holistically at our life and where we want to spend our time and where we're best at spending our time. And that's the personal development piece I think a lot of people don't take the time to do either, to say, who am I? What do I value? What do I like? What do I want to be spending most of my time doing? Because it's so important in business and in anybody's work that we feel fulfilled, right? And if we're running around doing all these tasks that are, not fulfilling to us, when we could be paying somebody else to do them, and we could actually be generating more money doing what we're good at. It's this balance. It's not just about the money. It's about the my big words: joy, freedom, fulfillment, right? Like, we want to feel that in everything that we do. And so I think that and then we get to lead it from there. We get to lead it the way that we want it to be. And I think most people, and I don't have the research in front of me, but most people live either on autopilot. They just do what they've always done, and they don't challenge themselves to grow and develop and do anything different. And they live less than content or less than fulfilled, or they live in reaction mode. And there are seasons, and you know this, and especially from my last podcast, there are seasons where we have unexpected stuff and we're in reaction mode, but we do not want to live there in a thriving season of our life. We want to be intentional. We want to be purposeful. We want to plan things out, because if we stay in that reaction mode, we're not going to get the momentum we're talking about. You can have the best revenue, diagram of your goals and your targets, but unless you're super intentional and strategic about moving towards them, it's just not going to happen. So
that is absolutely true. I love, you and I have gone to conferences with Brendan Burchard, and one of the things he talks about is scheduling joy in your life. And that's something that I am consciously thinking about now as I'm staring at this giant calendar on my wall. It's like, where do I, and just thinking about that, where do I get my joy? It comes from a lot of places, but I have learned that if I want get something done, I have to schedule it on my calendar, or it's just not going to happen. And that really does include going to the gym. It includes taking Saturdays off. There are a lot of Saturdays I sneak into my office because you just have to walk up the stairs. It's in my house. And it's just so tempting to do that, to just try and catch up when I don't have anything else, going on that day. And I, seize that moment. But really, that kind of stress kind of sneaks up on you. At least it does for me. I don't necessarily notice it. It's just that suddenly I start dreaming about work, and or I can't sleep at all because I'm thinking about work, and it just never leaves you. So I love that you start with that, because if we don't put those things on our calendar, it's pretty easy to get focused just on the money and not focused on the life that we want to live. I mean, it's that old saying, do you live to work or work to live, and,
Right. Right.
um, we don't, we don't want to always be constantly have work on our brain. It's just not
Yeah.
healthy for us.
Yeah. Well, and you and I are both big advocates of doing work that you do love. And so that can make it hard to like put it aside too. And we know that there's always going to be tasks in our work that we need to do that we don't love, bookkeeping, taxes, right? Like
Right.
even though
Yeah.
I have a CPA and I have bookkeepers, I still have to know my numbers, right? I still have to do
Yes.
something. And I still don't like it. It helps me uh feel a little less stressed out about it because I have experts that are actually looking over my shoulder and making sure that I, did things right or have considered everything. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be something that you need to do in your business. But here's the other side of too, what you said, so I work with leaders really about creating, happier, healthier, higher performing organizations and lives. And so when we start to think about high performance, we can often think, oh, well, super high achieving. No, high performance, and this is from Brendan too, he coaches on high performance, and it's about having that well integrated life, right? It's about understanding what you want and then creating that. And it's not for anybody to tell you what that integration looks like or that balance looks like. You get to decide. And so if you'd rather work on a Saturday than spend time with whoever you don't want to spend time with, then that's fine. Right. But what I encourage everybody to do, just like we talked about the big calendar for the year, but then every single week, you should be scheduling where your time goes. And this is a Saturday, Sunday activity for me. And that I coach people on, like either Sunday night or Monday morning, like at least just drop those significant things in your calendar and make sure because then you're going to see the white space, and oftentimes there's just not enough white space, right? And so we get to schedule in the white space, if you will, that's just margin for unexpected things. But we also get to schedule in that joy time, that fun time, whether it's, in Netflix. I mean, Brendan talks about how many months a year the average American loses watching, TV and scrolling on social media. And it's like 3 months or something crazy, right? And so it's fine. If you want to do that, it's fine. Like, I'm not here to tell you not to, but you get to schedule that in, and then you get to not say, well, I don't have time, right? Because you chose where you spent your time. And the way I really coach people on their calendar is look at it like Legos, right? Like block that time in for social media, block that time in for working with clients, block that time in for bookkeeping, whatever it is, and then put blocks in there of margin and joy. But then when something unexpected comes up, which, as you well know, my life has had a lot of unexpected challenges, I can pick those little blocks up and move them to someplace else in my calendar. Now, sometimes it's too much and you have to rework everything. But if this idea that you have control, you get to lead your schedule, you get to also role model for the people on your team. You get to role model for the people that are watching you and for your family. And, and I have 4 kids, and I know your kids are super important to you too. And I try to keep that perspective. Like, they're always watching, even though they're adults now, they're watching how I manage and how I do things. Right. And so do I want them seeing me totally stressed out and working all the time and saying no all the time? Or do I want them seeing me striving to be successful with a well-integrated life and without feeling, and I struggle from anxiety. I get it. I'll wake up thinking about things too. And the more that I get intentional and I know where my time is going and I know what I can do and what I can't do in a given week, even if I can't do it, it reduces the anxiety because I've already decided and I'm not thinking, how am I going to fit that in? How am I going to fit that in? How am I going to fit that in? Right. And so, I mean, we could talk about all this productivity, time management stuff for forever and having boundaries and all of that. But at the end of the day, your revenue goals need to align with the life that you want to have. Otherwise, you're going to resent your business. You're going to resent your clients. You're going to resent the work. And that is not a fulfilled and joyful life. It's just not, right?
That is so true. First of all, I just love where this conversation is going because you were teaching me so much. I love guests on my podcast because I learned so much, but, you're absolutely right. I think you talk about that. If you've ever had a client that you've been undercharging and that bitterness does creep in. It's like, I'm doing all this work for them and I'm not making as much as I should be or I could be.
Yeah.
And, you really need to set a number for yourself that is reflective of the job you do, the experience that you have, and the rate in which is, acceptable or what's the word? I'm not sure what the word is, but
That you're going
the
to have
going rate.
peace about, right?
Yes,
That's going to
yes,
honor your value. You know the value you bring to the table. And
yes.
I 100% agree. And I talked about this. I've fired clients before because also not they were willing to pay me, but they weren't willing to do the work and they weren't getting the results. And that wasn't good for me either. Right. That just
Yeah,
really, it wasn't good for them. It wasn't good for me. They wanted to keep paying me. And I'm like, no, like if you're not going to do the work, we're not going to get the results. That's just self-defeating for both of us. Right. And
yeah.
then there's those other clients that, we get to look at every client from the opportunity of growth, right? Is it a client that we are learning and growing better at our craft from? And so it's okay not to charge them that much because they're really, but we don't do it based on their willingness to pay. We need to do it based on our value and what we're going to get out of it. So, a lot of people say you just charge high ticket, go high price. Well, you can also set yourself up to fail really hard if you do that and you're not delivering at that level or you're not getting any clients because you've outpriced yourself without the credibility to be at that level or whatever it might be. And so I think that value can be defined by numbers for sure, but also the value you're getting out of taking on this client. Maybe it's a new sort of tool that you're trying or a new approach that you're trying or a new, product that you're trying. It's okay to have and of course you and I both do a lot of coaching around this, like price and then discount. No, don't, it's easier to drop your prices than to raise them. But we get to the point is we get to look at the value to us of taking on that client and charging what we want with that client. And yes,
Love
if
that.
we do it and then we just did it because they said they couldn't pay enough. That's where the bitterness and the resentment comes in, right? And sometimes they're not even saying that. We just undercut ourselves before we gave ourselves a real shot. So, and it's growth. I mean, I have played with my pricing in so many different arenas. Excuse me, and you can always go high and then say, well, because you're this kind of client or because I really value our relationship, I'm willing to do it at this price, right? So we can play with that too. But
Price
today,
anchoring.
we're talking about revenue budgeting. So you want to budget for what you're realistically going to be able to charge, no matter what you set your pricing at. Like realistically, what are you actually going to be generating this year? What do you think you can generate with the time that you have available?
Yeah, and looking forward to 2024, I mean, I break it down by quarter. I have my revenue goal for the year, and then I have my quarterly goal, and that's when I can start taking a look at my calendar and saying, okay, what can I realistically add this quarter? And now keeping in mind, and I'll talk more about this, I think on my next episode, I plan to do one on just scheduling and marketing as well. But you have to build some time into, let's say you have if you're launching a digital product, for example, you have to allow that time to promote it. You have to allow time in there to get all the pieces done and work with a team to do it. Or if you are still doing it yourself, you have to allow time for that too. So you have to be really realistic and really strategic about how much you plan for a quarter and how realistic it is that you are going to meet the goals that you set for yourself. So,
oh my gosh, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first started out. I'm like, well, I'm just going to go get clients and start serving them and making money.
oh, we've all done that.
I forgot about that marketing thing, that lead time thing, right? That you're so good at the strategic planning around actually laying that out. In fact, you and I have talked about things we're going to collaborate on. And I'm like, well, let's just hurry up and do it. You're like, no, hold on. We need more time. We've got to plan it. And I'm like, oh, I just want to do the thing.
That's because I panic. I don't want to be reaching for that paper bag to breathe into all the time.
Well, I think it's really important though, like you said, and as you and I encourage people, go on Amazon, buy that great big calendar, the 2024 calendar. I have it. It's a whiteboard one. And
Mm-hmm.
I write everything in there, and this is different than my daily planner, different than my Google Calendar, right? This is just like big picture. Keep an eye on that big picture. And, Brendan talks about having a battle board, which is more about mission and vision and stuff like that. But I like that big calendar to say, because for instance, I've been asked to put together a leadership development boot camp for an organization, and it's not going to happen until I think next June. And so, or next summer sometime. And so I can plan in my development time for that and not say, well, that's not till June. I'll just, do it then. I can plan those blocks of time that I'm going to build that thing. I also know that for me, a lot of my marketing is being a speaker at certain associations and certain events. And so I get to look at the timeline, like when do I need to apply by and when is that event? And, I just assume I'm going to get it and make sure that thing's on the calendar before I even necessarily apply if I feel like it's the right place to be. Because I can always, if I don't get it or decide not to go or whatever, I can always take it out. But it's a lot harder to say, oh, shoot, I got approved to speak at that thing, but I took a client at that time or I made a trip at that time, right? So, and these are just little examples, but having that big calendar, as soon as things get on your radar, or if like you're learning a marketing strategy from Janice about like, okay, you need 3 weeks to launch this and this is what it's going to look like. Put that on the calendar. Like, oh, wow, that's going to take time in those 3 weeks, right? I can't be running off doing XYZ if I'm running a webinar that week or whatever. So
Right. Just
seems like obvious things, but they trip us up, don't they?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And whoever said the analogy about putting the big rocks in first and then filling it with the small pebbles in the sand. I mean, those are the big rocks to plan for is if you think you may have a speaking gig coming up, you're right. You need travel time, you need planning time, you need to, just get everything together for that. It's better to schedule it in now than to panic and having to rearrange everything later. And also vacations. I always try and take the week between Christmas and New Year's off, and a summer vacation, I try and take some smaller breaks, but trying to get better about actual vacations. But
yes,
baby steps, right?
Yeah. But most of us live in reaction mode. We wait until we're like, oh, well, I really need a vacation. And then we just try to squeeze in there. And then that's not the best way to even take a vacation. Right. And making, travel plans with other people and whatnot. And this is something I've gotten a lot better about since my children or adults have their own lives, even their own families, right? Is me leading it, saying, this is when I would like everybody to be around. I don't care what time. Tell me what works for you, right? Figure out where I'm willing to be flexible, but also where my boundaries are. And it's the same, with clients. When I set up a contract, am I willing to do it on Zoom? Am I willing to travel? Like, think about those things before you set up your engagements, because, just like you just pointed out with travel, like when I go to a speaking gig, I also have learned for myself that I get to budget in sleep time. Like I want to be able to get a good night's rest before I get there. I don't want to be flying in the same day that I'm doing something, right? And when I'm doing a 3-day training, I just really have to look at, my sleep, my nutrition, my hydration, like all the things. And when am I going to get to exercise while I'm there? And so it's just back to this intentional living, this very purposeful way of building our business. And so I know we're kind of a little bit all over, but this is the best way that you could possibly set yourself up for success, that you could possibly say, like, these are the no matter if we're talking about revenue or other key deliverables, right? Other key results that you're looking for in your life or in your business. We all know the old analogies around losing weight, right? We've got what you don't measure, you can't manage, right? And it's true for everything. What you don't measure, you can't manage. So even as you're doing this, you're going to have some trial and error, right? You're not necessarily going to hit those exact revenue goals, but you darn sure can work towards them a lot more effectively if you know what they are, rather than just hoping, right? Hope is not a strategy. Like, I'm all about hope and faith, but hope is not a strategy. And so I think that's a Maxwell saying, or maybe somebody else said it, but but we've got to be strategic in the way that we're running our business, or it's just going to be frustrating. And worst case, it's just going to fold because we did too many things in reaction mode and without enough planning.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Well, I absolutely love everything we've talked about today. How can people get in touch with you? Or
Thank you. Thank you. So, yes.com, unlocking your extraordinary success.com, is the consulting company. And, we are, bringing in experts for business development, personal development, leadership development. In fact, Janice and I hope to collaborate. We're planning to collaborate, not hoping, we're planning.
Yes, we are.
Because we're really passionate about serving business owners and leaders in smaller organizations as well as bigger ones. So stay tuned for more about that. But yes.com. And then, we didn't talk much about this today, but mindset is everything. Like 80-90% of our success is our mindset, our attitudes, our perspective about what we're doing. And so I do have a free download, youyesmindsets.com. I think you're going to have it in the show notes.
I'll put the link. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's for everybody. Just, it's like 21 mindsets for success. And it's just a little sort of template to think about. Where are you really in how you're thinking about your success, about how you're thinking about your life, about how you're thinking you're going to move forward? Because if what is the old saying? If we tell ourselves we can, we can. If we tell ourselves we can't, we can't. Either way, you're true. It's true.
Yeah.
But I think that, there are powerful mindsets required to be successful in business and in life. But for those of you that are here, that you're tuning in, you're obviously ready to focus on personal development, ready to focus on making your business a success. And so we're excited about the future. And I'm really glad we're talking about this because I do my strategic planning for the next year in December. I do it a few days before Christmas, and then I take that week between Christmas and New Year's and really go deep on that as well. Because I've learned the hard way. If I don't have a plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right?
Yes,
That's very true for me. It's been very true for me. So thank you, Janice.
Very true for all of us. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today, Tammy. I sure appreciate you taking the time to do it, and I learned a lot. So looking forward to 2024.
Me too. All right. See you soon.
Take care. Wasn't that awesome? Tammy also knows that sometimes our mindset can get in the way during the planning process. So she has a special download for you called Unlocking Your Best Mindset. You can find the link to that in my show notes at myweeklymarketing.com/35. I'm so glad you joined us today. If you found this content helpful, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app of choice. Thanks so much for joining me today. See you next time. Bye for now.